Rara Imler, everybody's favorite slutty comedian or comedian slut or whatever. She'll be here too for the latter half of the show. Rax, it is so great to have you.
Thank you so much for having me back. It's good to see y'all both.
You actually were on like our pilot episode of Bitch Brunch, which makes it even more special that you're coming back.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Yeah, it wasn't fully conceptualized as a show back then, but that was basically, that was like the soft run.
And now you've worked out all the pieces perfect.
So anyway, today, for your wonderful return, we are revisiting our roots with sort of a general conversation on being a leftist e-thot. Sort of what it means, what we're doing, you know, what sort of relationship we have to the content we create, and just sort of generally, like, why are we even doing this, right? Like, why intentionally be a hot woman on the internet when, frankly, the internet hates hot women a lot, actually. So my first sort of general question for you, Rax, is when did you, like, start? When did you come out as an e-thot?
When did I come out as an e-thot off the closet? Honestly, I mean, a long time ago on a very different internet, like years and years ago, before left Twitter looks like anything like it looks now. Before I even really used Twitter, I come to Twitter to probably no one's surprise from Tumblr. And I was an e-thot on Tumblr, which is a much more shameful kind of e-thot to be, I reckon, than Twitter mind. And stuck it out through multiple platforms, just remained high-octane degrees of slutty, and have continued to do so into the present day when people know me a little more, and now it kind of matters what I say and when. So that sucks, but yeah, it's been ongoing since 2012, 2013, something like that.
Was it an intentional thing, or was it just sort of your natural personality vibing really well with the market?
It has never really been intentional on my part. I honestly don't even really consider myself an e-thot so much, although I'll take the label. It really doesn't matter to me. But I'm more just like a naturally loudmouthed girl who talks about sex because you gotta talk about something, and sex happens to be more interesting than most things.
Right.
It just kind of spiraled and took on its own shape, and I have been more or less along for the ride for years now.
Yeah. Well, I think that for me anyway, like when I look at like other people who are, you know, hot women on the internet, right? One of the things I appreciate is the authenticity of it. You know, it's not this sort of tightly constrained image of acceptable womanhood that we are sort of indoctrinated with and then reinforced to conform ourselves to, you know? It's sort of like, it's a box they want to put us in, and there's like a certain type of woman on the internet whose answer to that is no.
Right.
Yeah. Because it's definitely more than just the sex. I agree with you. It's the sex, but it's also being smart and unapologetic about being smart, and articulate and unapologetic about being articulate, and in command of your knowledge without apologizing for any of it, without softening yourself to sort of comfort the egos of threatened men.
Right. I mean, I think that there are a lot of different ways for a woman to be. And I don't think that what I'm doing is intrinsically any better or worse than, you know, some lady stays at home, raises kids, cooks dinner. If she's cool with that, then that's fine. I don't think that any of the stuff that we're doing online is as inherently meaningful as we want to believe it is, especially now, because real life spaces have been, you know, we've been robbed of them. All we have is online right now for the most part.
Yeah.
And I think that leads people to think it's incredibly important what some woman is saying or doing or showing in a picture of herself. And I don't want to encourage people to be slutty or to cover it up or anything like that. I want to encourage people to function online in a way that works for them, and to function in the real world, for that matter, in a way that works for them. And the problem, to my mind, even the point of this conversation, to my mind, is not what any women are doing. It's the way that men choose to respond to it and to try and shut it down from any number of different angles that, you know, just to shut women up. The goal is always to shut women up. And leftist men in particular are really good at doing that in the boundaries of a framing that doesn't seem incompatible with social justice, and that doesn't seem like they're just being misogynists. You know, they're good at coming up with reasons that they should have a say in what women on the internet are doing.
Yes.
And I don't accept that. I will do what I want to do, and not what, you know, some dude with a icon that's just a picture of Mao tells me to do.
Picture of Mao and 78 followers. You forgot the
But they,
78,
I mean,
wow, that's a big one.
A lot of these guys are popular and have a following, and that following is based in large part in what their listeners perceive as a willingness to confront women. And I don't think that's a good thing, and I don't really think that's to be encouraged so much.
Well, it's the sort of baseline assumption that leftist women are unable to confront liberal women and do it good enough. That like they need to step in because we're not already accomplishing that task, right? What they could do is elevate our voices and actually be allies by bringing us up, right? But what we see is actually women on the internet are like half as likely to get retweeted. Like just because being a woman on the internet is every bit as much a challenge as being a woman out in the world is. Like the hostility doesn't evaporate.
Well, and there's always this constant perception from a lot of people, and I've had to talk even like good friends out of thinking this way, because it's so pervasive, is like if you see a hot woman accomplishing things, she's accomplishing things because she's hot and no other reasons.
Yes.
And like Rax, you've put a lot of hard work into the things that you do. Rachel, you could say similar things about you, so I'd love for y'all to just dive in on that, honestly, because like that's one of the most frustrating things that you hear all the time from people, like the one dude in particular whose post really blew up, who's like a journalist, and he was like, why are serious journalists getting the same respect as hot women, as if like the hot women aren't doing anything.
Right. Well, and I think, you know, I do write. I do intentionally write these tweets. I do think about what I'm doing here. Like, this isn't something that I'm just like stream of consciousness vomiting out into the ether and the world is then like venerating me. You know, I read the theory. I do the praxis. It is a full-time job. But because it comes with being hot, you know, and because these people sort of fundamentally believe that that is the defining quality of womanhood is fuckability, you know, like they just focus on the one part of it. You know, and I've had men literally say to me, like, all I have to do is show a little cleavage and I get attention. And it's like, no, actually, makeup takes 2 hours. Like, getting the lighting right is really hard. Like, understanding photography and angles and planning out these things takes a lot of effort. Like, you have to get framing right for your shots. Like, there's actual skill to it. Not everybody can just take a selfie and look good, right? But the idea is like, oh, because it is focused on self and appearance and you are a woman, that is necessarily vain, that necessarily is not work, you know, that isn't like valid, right? And that's all from that sort of base assumption that like women are our image and nothing else.
I mean, I would say, like, regardless of whether it's even legitimate work or not to make yourself look good and present yourself in like an attractive sexual light, to me the important question is not whether that counts, it's why it should matter to anybody else that that's what I want to spend my own personal time doing. Because it doesn't really matter that much to me, again, on a personal basis, whether some dude on the internet thinks I fucked my way to my book deal. I wish I could have just done that. It would have been easy. Writing a book.
Much easier.
I spent so much less time and effort on sending this damn manuscript out.
Yeah.
That's neither here nor there. Like, I don't understand why people why people seem to find it fun to be embarrassed on behalf of hot women who are doing things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's just this very sort of shame-based culture that we have, broadly speaking. You know, this is like a sickness at the core of American culture itself, is that we rely primarily on like shame and adulation as currencies, you know, and it's really disordered, frankly. Like the way that we police other people's behavior, the amount of authoritarianism that we broadly accept and expect, you know, in all of our power hierarchies is really just a huge problem.
Right.
So I think in a way, you know, when you sort of take in like that whole landscape of oppression and decide like, you know what, I'm going to do this anyway. You know, there's something really powerful in that. And that's in that rebellion, there is sort of a larger truth being uncovered, I think. And that's maybe why the work itself, like doing Thotaganda, is so important to me, and why I am so proud of it, is because like there's an extent to which I am intentionally inverting the male gaze, you know, and saying like, yeah, like I know you're looking at me and I'm in charge of that now.
Yeah, they really don't like that.
No, they really don't like that. It makes a lot of them very mad. Some of them it turns on a whole lot, and those are my, like, y'all are fun. I appreciate you in my comments. Like, that's cool. Ones who are like still respectful but very turned on by it, I'm like, yeah, like I appreciate this attention.
I mean, I want to like live in a world where it's a neutral thing to just be a woman looking any which way and saying whatever she has to say. I mean, it is possible to be an evil, dangerous woman. It's possible to be an evil, dangerous, hot woman, obviously. I don't want the hotness to be indicative of like evil or vanity or selfishness in its own regard. I really don't want it to be notable to anybody that I have a loud mouth and tell embarrassing stories about my sex life. I just kind of want that to be a neutral thing, and it's a hassle that it's not. I don't want to be in open rebellion against anybody. I just kind of want to do my thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's like the goal state for most of us. But at the end of the day, like, this is the reality we're forced to live in. And it becomes this rebellious thing. It becomes this inherently political act, not because of even your intention, but because of your willingness to break the rules, right? To reject these conventions and take power in a way that we're not supposed to. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I will say, as you know, someone who was assigned male at birth, growing up, you know, I was told a lot of things, you know, in terms of like as fact about like the way that, you know, women were, especially around sexuality, and like just being a woman expressing sexuality, it is extremely defiant of those particular American perceptions, because you're behaving in a way that's quote unquote abnormal. But in reality, you're just being a regular human, because it turns out that all regular humans are kind of sex obsessed, and we want to talk about these things sometimes. And like, you know, have like a certain amount of like shared like understanding and experience with other people by sharing those things from time to time. Like all that turns out is pretty normal. But like these things are presented as like fact. Like there's a whole, I don't know exactly. I mean, I'm sure that it's similar in other places, but I only want to speak to America. There's a whole American myth about what a woman is. And unfortunately, it's like these things that you're describing, it's like these very simple things defy that myth so heavily that I think that's part of why these like really knuckleheaded people on left Twitter have these I shouldn't say people, men on left Twitter have these very bizarre and extreme reactions, is because they just don't even know what a woman is, I think.
I also think these things are heavily racialized offline as well as on, and left Twitter, the most prominent members of it are white and seem to hold themselves to a certain standard of behavior that I personally can't meet. I mean, the most prominent women of left Twitter, I don't want to name any names or cause any trouble, but you know, they tend to reel it in a way that I am just not capable of doing. And I think that if you're going to be like a loudmouth slutty woman, whether you're white or like, especially if you're black or not white, you just open yourself up to this world of undeserved shit just by acting in a way that comes naturally to you. And I don't understand what the reward is in dialing all that stuff back. I mean, I'm sure there are people who have no idea what I get out of being a loudmouth bitch.
Yeah. Well, I think like it's like be non-white, be loudmouth, be slutty, pick one, maybe two if you get lucky.
Right.
And it's like it's about the sort of schematic ideal of woman, right? Of what woman means in our culture and in the way that we talk about and think about women, right? And so there's this sort of like woman who is white, blonde, blue-eyed, small waist, big breasts and hips. You know, lately she has big lips as well and is sort of ethnically ambiguous in as much as she has too much bronzer on. And this image of this woman exists. She's chaste, she's a wife, she's a mother, she's also a successful businesswoman. And it's like, you'll notice I'm getting closer and closer to just describing Barbie, and that's on purpose, right? Like, we are meant to be this. And every single way we deviate from that image is another hit on us. You know, it's another hit on our character or our credibility or our value or people's willingness to even engage with us at all, right? And I think in a meaningful way, especially if you are Black, like that by itself is probably 2 hits, right? Because we don't just like not include Black people in, you know, white supremacy, but there is actually, independently from all the rest of racism, unique anti-Blackness in our culture.
I mean, if you need proof of this on left Twitter, I think all you have to do is compare something like Ryan Knight's comments to like Brianna Joy Gray, right? Like, you know, like you just go look at popular left Twitter, but like compare the way like a woman of color gets treated. Because like, you know, both Brie and Ryan Knight have expressed dumb views at times. Ryan Knight, his bad takes generally get forgotten in about 48 hours at the most.
Yeah.
Brianna Joy Gray will get like harassed by commenters for weeks and months about comments that she made forever ago in this really vile way. So, I mean, I think, you know, just go look anywhere on left Twitter and you'll see this, in my opinion. Like, I know that we'd like to think that like we're above all this stuff as leftists, but we're not. And in fact, thinking that we're above it all is part of the problem. All y'all who think that you're super woke, you are the problem. Like, the best leftists I know are the leftists who show up and they say, yeah, I'm kind of racist, I'm working on it. Like, I've got all these bigoted stereotypes in my head that I was fed as a child, and I haven't figured out what all of them are. And sometimes I still realize that I'm having them, you know, but I'm working on it. Those people I trust. Those of you who are like, I'm perfect and I don't have anything bad to do in regards to, you know, racial equality. I don't have any bad takes on gender equality, any of that kind of stuff. I don't trust you.
Yeah, I mean, I think that is like really appropriate, right? Like it's a self-awareness. And if you think you're not racist, you're like definitely racist. If you think you're not sexist, you're definitely sexist, because anything other than recognizing you have these capacities shuts out the kind of learning you need to do to stop being that way. The best any of us are ever going to be is a racist in recovery or a sexist in recovery, you know? We're never going to completely undo it from ourselves, but if we try really, really hard, we can avoid passing it on to our kids. We can avoid passing it on to our grandkids, right? And I think maybe this is because of our sort of fiercely individualistic and sort of consumer-based culture. we really cannot accept anything that doesn't give the solutions within our own lifetimes. You know, like if it's not going to work before we die, it's not worth doing. And I think that is a huge failing on our part, you know, and a lack of imagination as well.
Yeah, I definitely feel you with regards to the lack of imagination because there does seem to be, and again, as I'm talking about this, I'm talking specifically about left Twitter. Mm-hmm. I have done plenty of IRL work that does not suffer these exact same deficiencies, but Twitter does encourage people to lean into the bit and to say things that are shocking, quote unquote shocking, you know, a little bit extreme for the maximum amount of attention. And, you know, you see that same person in real life, they're not going to tell you that you're embarrassing yourself by posting a picture of your cleavage online. They wouldn't dare. Like, the rules are fundamentally different on Twitter. And as such, there is this sect of people whose whole Twitter persona is based around, like, I'm post-woke. All that stuff is dealt with now. I don't see the point in engaging in even a shallow capacity with what people will call identity politics, and it's a position that I understand, but I don't think that it's the right thing to just tell all these women, all these people of color, like, hang on and we'll get to you if we get to you. It's not the move.
Yeah, it's, you know, nobody's free until we're all free.
Speaking of getting to someone, let's get Rara in here.
Heck yeah. What's up, Rara?
Hey, what's up?
Welcome. It's always great to have you.
Thank you.
We're talking hot girls, which makes you absolutely the perfect person to join us.
Thanks. I don't feel very hot right now. I just took I'm not wearing any makeup. I just took a shower. I'm feeling lukewarm.
I relate to that on a spiritual level. I was saying before we got on the air that what I do on the days I don't want to wear makeup is I put the glasses on, which then like the entire eye area in such a way that it's like no longer matters if I'm wearing it.
You're right. I should have just worn my glasses. That's okay. That's why I'm wearing a hat. So
the hat works too. It's the same exact effect, right?
Yeah, it's hiding enough, you know.
I think Rax is the only one who came on point. Like, I didn't care any of the stuff I would do.
I'm a little embarrassed. I'm wearing so much makeup right now.
No,
you look amazing. Yeah, no, we are all slacking. We should all be bringing it up to your level.
My original
I'll put a little lip gloss on. How about that?
Yeah. Right.
This actually gives me a perfect segue to transition to something that I wanted to talk about when Rara got here. I've been making the argument since the new Star Wars trilogy came out that Adam Driver is proof that anyone can be hot. You just have to choose it.
What?
I would like to hear this panel's thoughts on this.
Do you mean Adam Driver decided he was hot and everybody
he decided to be hot and then he made it so?
Well, okay, so in as much as being hot is like a function of power, sure. But like if he had been like really like extraordinarily ugly, or if he'd had like a significant facial deformity, I don't think he could have like willed his way out of it, you know? Like I don't think that the like hot to ugly dynamic is purely virtual. Does that make sense?
I mean, it's so like the things that would make him unattractive are so negligible to me. So I get what you're saying. Like I agree. I think it's a charisma thing though, right? Like
it's definitely a huge part of it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I don't know. I mean, I think, you know, we look at the actual data around physical attraction. You know what I mean? Like there are definable qualities that are pretty much universal to things people find attractive. Like having a symmetrical face is pretty universal. The specifics of that face are very malleable. Like the ideal image of like what is beautiful, like the face of Barbie throughout the ages, I think is, you know, much more negotiable. But like symmetry is there, looking healthy, generally speaking, is there. Like pretty much everybody's into clear skin, right? And I think that those things do provide. And Rara, I don't think we're here yet. I was talking about the sort of ur woman of like what what an ideal woman is, you know, by the
Mhm.
standards of patriarchy and white supremacy.
Yeah. Well, that changes. Yeah, definitely.
That image changes some, but like the sort of core framework, I think, is intrinsic, right? Like we want to reproduce with people who have seemingly healthy genes. And that's about it. I'm never going to go into Evo Psych because frankly, I think everything after that is just like a bunch of people trying to intellectualize like the worst parts of power dynamics. But I think the sort of idea that there are like biological imperatives at play is like worthwhile.
Right. Yeah. I don't know. I can't speak on all that too much, but I just think like, I think Adam Driver's hot, like definitively, yes.
I mean, we don't have to keep being specific on the example. I'm more just curious about like the virtuality of hotness. How real is it, and how much is it just something that you can kind of put on?
I think it depends on how you want to be hot. Like if you want to be hot in a traditional, like classic, like pinup 50s guy or girl sense, I think that's much harder to get away with if you don't have those like features, if you don't have like, but I think if you are trying to be like hot, like cool, like, oh, like tattooed, you have like a cool, like sharp, modern sense of style, you're more contemporary. I think that is just at the whim of, you know, of like social trends, or I think it's at the whim of like style trends really. And like whatever youth culture is like obsessed with at the moment. But I think it's easier to be hot as an alternative person than it is as like a classic like 50s like style pinup and, you know, button down kind of guy. Like I think it's easier to be a little scummy hot than it is to be like polished hot, you know?
That reminds me of a tweet I saw the other day that said like, are you a Pornhub category or are you privileged? You know, like, yeah. You know?
Oh God.
Yeah, like I'm inked. I'm like the inked Pornhub category. Like, like I just don't. I haven't been. You know, I haven't been like mainstream. Like, I'd say mainstream attractive. Like, and I say this like mainstream as in like conservatives would find you like hot and breathable or something.
Attractive.
Like what? You could be a White House press secretary.
Yeah, like if like I haven't been like White House press secretary hot since I was like 17, which is gross. So it's like doesn't even count because I've had tattoos and piercings since I was like 15. So or yeah, like tattoos starting at 17. So I haven't had like I don't know what it's like on the other side of that unless I'm like fully dressed like head to toe where you can't see any tattoos and like but like I don't know what's on the other. Have you Rax, have you experience the mainstream hotness? Like, I mean, you're pretty hot yourself already, but
I'm thinking of the time.
No, I know what you mean. It's like a particular aesthetic that you know you can either cultivate or not. I've never partaken of that shit. Just you know, like you, I've had tattoos all over my person starting from when I was like 15, 16 years old. I've had a lot of god-awful haircuts. I wasted a lot of years on bad haircuts. And this is like about the most conventionally attractive that I get. And it's pretty close, if I'm honest. Like I'm thin. I appear to be able-bodied. And I guess I have a symmetrical face. Look like close to what a hot woman is supposed to look like. It could all go away at any time. I'm constantly double handfuls of Ruffles potato chips and knocking back the air, and it's all going to be taken away from me in the next 10 years.
Yeah, aging out of being hot is a weird existential crisis that all of us, I think, are facing in our 30s.
Yeah.
And this is something like you and I have in common, Rax. Is like Jewish hot.
Yeah, I've never really been clear on whether, and that comes up with me a lot because Nazis get angry at me because they want to me.
Yeah.
Like, it's okay to fuck a Jewish person, and I'm like, never speak about me.
The men in the comments of this show are wild. They love calling me Abigail Shapiro, and I'm pretty sure it's because they've only ever seen 2 Jewish women. But one of the things I wanted to bring up from your history that I remember, because it just stuck with me so hard.
Oh no!
It was somebody like commented and told you, or no, they sent you like a message saying you had a witch skull. Yeah, one of the most ridiculous things I've ever heard. I had to like go Google it, and then I found
witch
out
skull.
Wild.
Yeah, the opposite is an angel.
Yeah, that doesn't sound anti-Semitic at all. Like,
no. Yeah, well, that's the thing. Is like they have this like whole like phrenology thing going on there, where like you're more attractive if you have the angel skull, which is like more upwardly facing or whatever. Like your angles go up, and if your angles go down into a point, you have a witch skull, and you're like, ooh, and I'm like, this is literally just Jewish people. Like,
yeah. No, it's just straight up phrenology. They're missing all the parts about the devious physiognomy of the Italian, but it's all in there. And that's it. Like a 5-paragraph email. It was the longest email I've received in ages. Through the
that guy has a fetish. That guy has a fetish. Like that's like nobody fixates on a body part like that unless it's like sexual. Like in my opinion.
Like telling me my hair is starting to go gray, lines around my eyes, and I'm like, you look too closely at me, sir.
Yeah,
I can't get off unless I have the calipers out.
that, but it's on the PT and it's very.
So I have a nose story too, because I had a Nazi in my mentions.
Oh,
no. Well, this is like a while ago, but I had a Nazi in my mentions that was like trying to make fun of me for something I said and was like, oh, look at that nose, da 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 da. And it's just like, okay, like this is not. I don't know what you mean by that. Like, do you mean my nose is ugly? Because I think I have a cute nose, but also like my nose is very like my nose is possibly like one of the only like things I have in common with like my grandmother. Like we have similar eyes and similar nose. And my grandmother is indigenous, like Pacific Islander. And I was like, yeah, I'm proud of my nose. I'm proud of my Pacific Islander nose. And it was just like such a weird thing because it was just like, are you insinuating that I'm Jewish or something? Because that's the only time I've ever heard people, well, that and like sometimes when people are trying to insult Arab people, they'll like point out their nose or something like that. But I just thought it was like, it's just like such a weird thing because like there's no like Jewish nose. There's no like, I don't know, there's no like inferior nose. And it's like, that's like not a thing. Like that is a genetic marker of anything. Like your nose shape doesn't influence anything. Like, and what could be a Jewish nose could like very easily be an Arab like nose or like literally any region. Like it just doesn't matter. It's just like genetics. It's weird. Like I don't understand their fixation on like certain body parts, you know, that are like pretty. I don't know. I'm just like Nazis are fucking weird.
Well, it stems from like specifically anti-Ashkenazi. Propaganda, basically, right? And you see like the big, like sort of like, oh, they got this really exaggerated hook nose, right? And that's like directly from anti-Ashkenazi propaganda, just like in Germany and around Germany, and like sort of as fascism was rising. And that's where the stereotypes come from, is literally from Nazi propaganda, right? I actually have more of a Persian nose, and we don't really know 100% sure, like, but we suspect because my family came by way of Spain that we were probably Sephardi and not Ashkenazi. But like, I can go from like white to like, oh, you look really Persian, and all I have to do is like 90 degrees. And I think it's like the real difference we're seeing here is not, you know, oh, like my nose is better or worse. It's just that like my nose is closer or further away to like specifically whatever type of like upper class nose is fashionable.
Right.
Yeah. And I think right now it's like white women, what is fashionable for white women who sort of dictate the rest of culture by way of white supremacy, like is to be just shy of ethnically ambiguous. Like you want to keep the whiteness, but like just on the edge of it, because they want to still fetishize, you know, non-white people.
Right. I don't know. I think it's like, I think the new thing with white women is straight up brown face. Like I think that they obsess over having like more like Anglo features, but with darker skin. And like, they think that like, that's like the ultimate in beauty. And it's like, and it's really like interesting, especially, I mean, this is like very common with sex workers too, I think, is that like, you see people like over tan, like to the point of like brown face. And you're just like, and it's like, and then they'll be like ethnically ambiguous and you'll find out they're just like white or something. And you're just like, yeah, this is gross.
Yeah,
like, but it's like, it's always, yeah, I think it is so that they can have the option to capitalize on that ambiguity, but also have the option to put it away when it's detrimental to them in society. And that's like really gross to me. I'm sure everyone feels the same way I do in this panel, but especially as someone who's mixed and light skin, like I don't tan as dark as some of these white girls. Like it is really disturbing.
Yeah.
I think the Jenner girls are very much the model for strippers.
Yeah, go ahead.
Sorry. The Jenner girls have been the model for strippers in particular for a good few years now. And long after I retired from being a stripper, the look was a little bit different then. But I think that sex workers in particular are rewarded in professional settings for courting a degree of ethnic ambiguity that is not possible for everybody. Like, if you have really dark skin, people aren't going to think that you're a white woman. It's just not going to happen. And so it's just a reward system that intrinsically favors white women, as usual, and white features that are malleable in that way. And you see it writ large outside of strip clubs and like other sex work settings, but you see it really honed to a sharp degree in strip clubs, just the ways that ethnic ambiguity is rewarded and then put back in the box at the end of the night.
Yeah. It's like, it's really, it doesn't feel good. Like as someone like, and I imagine it's not something like, I think this is why I have a hard time with strip clubs in particular, is because like, I am fetishized a lot in when I'm at work. And it's like, it's not until I like confirm what my ethnicity is that I end up getting like really that like straight up thrown in my face. But like people, like customers will ask me, they'll be like, oh, like, what are you? Like, what are you? And I'll be like, oh, I'm Pacific Islander. And they're like, okay, but like, you're like white. And I'm just like, yeah, I'm like Pacific Islander and white. It's just that white isn't like, I have an ethnicity. I thought that's what you wanted to know, not like what the color of my skin is. Cause yeah, I look white, but they'll be like, as soon as they figure out like what my ethnicity is, then they just like, it's like something starts turning in their head and they start treating me like way differently. And it's really gross. And it makes me not want to even talk about like my heritage or where I'm from or where I grew up, because it makes me feel like shit. Like they think it's, and what's worse is like, they think that it's like a compliment. Be like, oh, my exotic island girl. Like they love that shit. Yeah. And you're just sitting there like, this sucks. I fucking hate you. I feel so fucking uncomfortable by this. And they'll do it to other girls too. And it's like, and they do it to the Black girls. They love to like ask, they love to ask any of the like they love to ask strippers, first of all, like, do you have kids? Like, oh my God, do you come from a broken home? That kind of shit. Cause they love, one of the aspects of fetishization is that like, you must come from like a broken home. If you're like, even slightly brown to Black and you work in a strip club, there's always just like this assumption that you, like your family's fucked up or something. But it's really jarring because it's like, I can, if I was wearing like a blonde wig that day and I was like slightly less tan, I could get away with saying like, oh yeah, I'm white, if I'm really just tired that day and I don't want to fucking deal with it. Right. But like Black girls do not have that option. A lot of the darker skinned girls do not have that option. And it's like, it's a privilege that I have for sure, but it's really, really gross. Like the amount of fetishization that you deal with as a sex worker, just right off the bat. So anyone that like invites that kind of thing, it just really like irks me that like people feel that they have to do certain things in order to be successful in an industry. And it's like, and one of those things is perpetuating like horrible, like trends like that. So
yeah, you mentioned kind of at the beginning that there's this sort of pressure towards ambiguity in sex work, but I don't think it's just sex work actually, because we've had this like whole string recently of academic white women being caught in brownface, you know what I mean, or in blackface in the case of Rachel Dolezal, not all Rachels, and like it's just this sort of endemic issue, I think, within capitalism, right? And one problem is when I start to say something like within capitalism, you know, that it opens the door to this sort of class reductionism, which I'm not going to do, and I think it's a very bad thing to do. But I think it interrelates, right? I think that there's an interaction at the point between being like a woman who has some power but wants to get more power, or a woman who has very little power and is trying to get power. Like there's that same pressure, it just manifests in slightly different ways. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So like, you know, I think when we look at like sort of the presentation of strippers, it's very sort of over the top sexualized. Within the academy, it's maybe more about like the really toxic kind of idpol, you know, the sort of like how valid are your thoughts based on your own ethnic ambiguity or whatever. Right, because you have to be, to win at idpol specifically, right, you have to be not all the way white, but passable as white enough. You know, like you have to maintain the academic voice, which is inherently very much about like white standards, white preferences for language, right?
I don't know if that's true in the sectors of the academy where these women keep getting caught out. I think it's kind of the opposite. They're trying to force their way into a conversation that has up until this point been largely written by Black people and Black feminists and Black academics, and they want a seat at that table where they can help make those rules rather than a seat at the white academics table, which does function, I think, much as you're saying, as this classical ivory tower. But that's what they want. They want to be the cool academics who get to say whatever they want about the state of Black people or Latino people, and not have it be a demerit against their character because they're the white person telling Black people how to behave.
Right. Well, and we agree. We fundamentally agree there. I don't think these are like mutually exclusive, right? Because the pressure towards conformity to whiteness is definitely there on everybody, you know? And so when I say it's still very white dominated, it's because like even within the academy, like Black professors, Black academics, you know, academics of color, generally speaking, are still forced to adopt certain sort of normative standards of white culture, right? In terms of appearance, in terms of like which, you know, dialect they might be using, right? In terms of like their sort of broad approach to things. It is very, very about conformity. It's why I left the academy ultimately, is because it is this incredibly toxic and like abusive environment where you have to conform exactly to these people's standards or like you're ruined. And so I think you are correct that they have chosen specifically like African-American studies, race studies, to try and insert themselves into that way so that they can be cool and edgy and they have more play. But also I think that's because of white supremacy, right? Like it's because of the way whiteness itself is created as like a carrot to like a stick, you know?
I was reading someone's tweet about this the other day. Her name is like Jaya something. She's like, and I forget what her name is on Twitter, but she was saying like, and this is an interesting take. I don't necessarily like agree with it, but I think she was saying something like this is a response, like all these white women pretending to be Black women feels like a response to to like identity politics, and I think, and she was saying in the sense that like, I hope I'm not butchering this. I'm not trying to give her a bad name or anything, but like in the sense that like they don't know, like they have all this white guilt and they don't have anywhere to put it. Yes. So they just want to deny their whiteness basically. And I've seen some other people make this exact kind of like observation, is just like, well, you know, when you tell people like, and I'm not saying this like as myself, but like when you tell people that it's like that, you know, you're white and you're descended from slavers and you're this and this and this and you're privileged, and they don't know how to like, they don't know what to do with that. They start like rejecting their whiteness in weird ways. And I think like I've seen examples of that in the real world, but I was just wondering what y'all think about that.
I think that definitely bears out on Twitter constantly, because on Twitter you see this specific type of white woman who wants to talk about the ways she is not like a white woman, and like talk about different features that she has that are not physically like other white women's, and stuff like that.
Or like their ancestry results or something like that.
Yeah. And it's all very shallow, and again, clamoring for a seat at a table for no visible reason except class, as far as I can tell. And I don't think it's a good idea to embrace whiteness, and that's obviously crazy talk. I think it's mostly a good idea to just shut the fuck up and let people have a conversation without it being about you once in a while.
I think a lot of white people that are like relatively liberal or left like struggle with just a certain degree of humility to just accept the idea, and this is even true if you're just white passing for a lot of people, I think too, to just accept the idea that like we have privilege in so many situations. We get to be we get the megaphone in almost every room we go into, right? But then on the left, occasionally you're going to walk into a room where you're going to be told to sit in the corner quietly while the black people are talking, and some people can't handle that. like and it's like this is 10 minutes.
I feel like it's a punishment.
Your entire life, right? It's like it's not a punishment. You literally, what they're doing right now as a white person, you get to do that all of the rest of the time in your entire life. You know, like white folks, we just get to like yell, and people just line up to hear us yell. You know, like. In a way that like if you're a person of color, it's just not the same. And so I think a lot of white people that are like drifting left are like, they just struggle with that like moment of humility to just realize that okay, occasionally there's going to be places where this isn't the best thing. And that's okay, because
or maybe you don't have as much
90% of places still. Like,
or maybe you don't have as much to offer in this situation, and you just need to be okay with that. Like you just need to be okay with being a warm body in the room, because sometimes that's all you're going to be able to contribute to a conversation. Like I think it is like somewhat interesting to see who makes it over that hump of like being called out and called in and actually starting to put in the work, and who gets left behind and is still like really stuck in the debilitating part of identity politics, which is like realizing like your privilege and realizing how much of it you have, and like where it's not welcome. And some I feel like a lot of people end up just giving up at that point and just being like liberal, you know, and then like and then just focusing on never getting canceled, right? Never doing anything wrong and never getting canceled or whatever. And like I think as leftists we have to like let people mess up, and we have to let people like call people out. But again, we call people out, we call people in, because it's really like bad if people get stuck in that debilitating place, you know, like if you don't give them any kind of option to like do better, and you're just like, no, fuck you, you did something wrong, like fucking get over yourself. There's definitely people that will be like, oh, okay, I'll figure out what I did wrong. But it's like more often than not, there's just people like the ego is a thing. And some people never get over like the ego part of organizing. And I told some other organizers this before, but it's like with leftist organizing, you have to be humble every day. You have to let it humble you every day. And if it doesn't humble you, every day, then you're doing something wrong and you're not listening enough and you're not really serving your community enough. If you feel like you're like, I got this, like, it's like, no, you probably don't. Like,
if you don't have imposter syndrome, it's because you're incompetent. Right?
I think social media in particular has been really bad for that attitude, because Twitter especially, but all social media to an extent, does not reward thoughtfulness or subtlety or having a long, kind of difficult conversation with somebody who's just learning. Mm-hmm. What it rewards is like nasty shit that's fun to read and retweet and dunking on people. And for all that, I mean, leftism hasn't been shifted to online, but there is a lot of leftist community online, and it has a really nasty habit of giving into the dunking urge that is inherent to social media, rather than the being careful with people urge and understanding that you're going to have to organize with people who don't know their ass from a hole in the ground. Work with them, and also those people are going to have to be comfortable learning and taking their L's. And if there's one thing that I think Twitter has really fucked us over on, it's that ability to sit in your discomfort and make mistakes and not double down on it. Like, so many people start getting owned online and then they just double down, and you're like, just log off. Like, you would have been fine if everyone just got a chance to be like, hey, what the fuck? Like, because I don't even think getting dunked on is like the worst thing that can happen. It's just the worst thing that can happen is you doubling down and then everybody realizing that you're just a huge piece of shit. Like, and it's like, you're just hurting yourself. Like, you're hurting your ability to actually like make comrades and make allies with whatever cause you're doing, because you don't know when to shut the fuck up. And it's like, I see too many people that get to that point, and like, or just, yeah, I agree. Like, I don't like the nasty, I mean, I myself am a fucking shit poster and I do dunk on people all the time, but I've started to be more like directed and poignant in my dunking. Like, I try not to like dunk on small accounts that like, they're just nobodies that are just trying to be provocative or something. Like, I don't like doing that. I try to punch up whenever possible at like bigger accounts that have like way more of a following that could do way more damage with their shitty, stupid opinions. But like, yeah, I think this like, this instinct to just like, to dunk and block and do all this stuff, I don't think it's good for organizing. I think it's fun and cathartic for about 5 minutes. And then it's like, you're on to the next target, right? And I don't think that's like conducive to good organizing.
Well, there's a certain violence to it, right? Like, actively and intentionally hurting a person's feelings is a kind of violence. The question is, when and how is that kind of violence appropriate, right? And I think one of the things that social media does is it encourages that violence in contexts that are not actually appropriate. So if your goal is to educate somebody, to grow somebody, to build like a mass movement, dunks are not going to help you get there, you know. And this is obviously like a very unpopular opinion among the dirtbag left, right? This idea that you have to, you know, espouse kindness and forgive people. But outside of specifically the dirtbag left, who can, by the way, eat my entire asshole, the rest of us, I think, are actually really interested in forgiveness and really interested in that growth, and like actually like empathetic people who want to do the work, make the difference, and meet people where they are. Speaking of meeting people where they are, we are meeting the end of this episode. This was a really awkward segue, but we're getting there. You know, it's fine. If you would like to meet the Not Safe at this point network where we are, please consider giving us some money. It's right here, patreon.com/notsafe. We are completely run on donations. We have just about reached the point where we're breaking even, but until we do that, it is actually costing us money every single month to make this happen. You would be making a huge difference for us, not just in terms of like making it so that we don't have to pay for this, but also just like morale. Kennedy will wear a banana suit. It'll be fun. We'll throw a little party. We'll say thank you to you. You can do that for $1. You can get Kennedy to wear a banana suit, which is like, I mean, that's easily worth it.
That's the best value on the internet.
Yeah, easily.
I'm just gonna come out and say it. I don't praise myself a lot, but
yes. And that will also get you access to like special content. We do shows,
post
we
shows.
do occasional like random things that we just do for fun that you don't get to see unless you're a patron. We're talking about doing a couple of like small one-off podcasts and series and stuff like that we have that we're working on, and it's really cool and it's really worth it. Feel free to give us more money if you have it, like but if you can throw $1 our way, it's really helpful, it's really appreciated. Rara, thank you so much. I know you also have a show on the network. It is Hot. Another one coming up, right?
Yeah, it's the stream is every Wednesday from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, and then we also are putting out going to be putting out regular podcast episodes from parts of those streams. And I also have like a ton of stuff on my Patreon too. It's patreon.com/islandgoth. I'm already subscribed to Not Safe Network too, so I'm just gonna bump up my subscription. Whatever. I'll get Kennedy to into a banana suit. I'll do it. But yeah, you can follow me on Twitter at IslandGoth for like updates and stuff. Yeah, it's pretty new, so I'm working more than it's paying, but that's normal, and I feel good about it. So yeah.
And Rax King, thank you so much for coming back. It is a pleasure as always. What would you like to plug today?
I would like to plug today. I would like to plug my Patreon also, patreon.com/RaxKingIsDead. That's my username on everything. Rax King is Dead. If you want to find me anywhere except LinkedIn, which I do not have. I also have a book coming out next year that is not available yet, but I just wanted to brag about it because it still hasn't stopped being exciting to me. So, yeah, thank you. And that's it.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here with us. God, there were like other things I even wanted to talk about with y'all. We'll have to do it again because you're both great to have just around, like to talk to, but also in terms of producing content because you're fabulous. I will say, as always, we are the Uncommonly Pretty podcast. And now that's streamers because why waste a good thing? Men on the left, get it together. Really, seriously, please get it together. Women on the left, thank you for being here with us anyway. And lovely non-binary people in the middle and the left, y'all are great too. We're great. I don't know. Whatever. Gender's weird. Genders are fuck. There are an infinite number of genders, and they get larger.
Gender is a fuck.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. An infinitely increasing number of genders that gets bigger every single time somebody questions anybody's gender at all.